Hey all, and thanks for joining us on this paranormal pit stop. Tonight, we'll be delving through a notable cemetery located off Belen Street in Guadalajara, Mexico, that's recognized for its hosting of a number of major names from Jalisco's history, also referred to as Santa Paula Cemetery, and rumored to be roamed by all manner of supernatural energy. Are you prepared to brave the ghosts of Museo Panteón de Belén? Historically, in 1786, Guadalajara would face widespread famine, after which its former hospital would prove ill-equipped to handle the growing populace, and in 1793, the Hospital of Belen would undergo inauguration. Following the Independence War, famine would continue through the region and would be joined later by disease, and in 1833, a good percentage of the population would be killed or severely affected by waves of deadly cholera. When the city required a burial grounds outside of populated areas, it was decided orchard space from the Hospital of Belen would be utilized, which would actually cement our preferred moniker for the yard, being Panteón de Belén. And in 1848, cemetery grounds were developed and constructed by Manuel Gomez Ibarra, and were divided into two sections, one for common interments, and another for wealthy interments, the latter of which held a chapel dedicated to Santa Paula, earning the expanse the name the Santa Paula Cemetery. Burials at the cemetery would continue until 1896, when the health authority would order operations ceased. The mausoleum beneath the old chapel formerly held remains from a number of notable names from the city's history, until 1957, when all of said remains were reinterred at a new location, and what was once the common burial area has since been transformed into the Tower of Medical Specialties for the hospital. Today, Panteón de Belén remains open, offering both day and night tours, allowing for any with an interest to appreciate the chillingly gorgeous expanse and its many works of art. Over the centuries, the entirety of graveyard grounds have been shrouded in local legends and tales of the otherworldly, with those frequenting their bounds reporting extreme cold spots, disembodied voices, and the constant feelings of being closely watched or of being followed. One popular story surrounding Santa Paula tells that long ago, a pirate, having passed his prime, decided to leave his life of plunder behind and retire to Guadalajara. It's told this man had but one child, who was never made aware of his father's past deeds, and that the retiree stashed a massive fortune in stolen treasure somewhere within, around, or even under the city, only to die shortly after before he could share its location, after which he was buried at our cemetery in question. Legend furthers to tell that now, if one approaches the old scallywag's grave and prays with devotion in their heart, they may just get a visit from the pirate's spirit, who is waiting for a chance to share his treasure, albeit only with someone who truly deserves it. A second story surrounding Museo Panteón de Belén is often called the child afraid of the dark, and tells of how on May 24th of 1882, a big storm hit Guadalajara just as a young couple was putting their 10-year-old son, Ignacio Torres Altamirano, to bed. More affectionately called Nachito, this boy is said to have had a deathly fear of the dark, and would refuse to sleep unless two torches were lit just outside his bedroom window. During this storm, however, his torches were extinguished. Nachito became trapped within his room, and sadly, the next morning his mother would arrive to find her son dead of fright. The grieving couple would lay their child to rest in the cemetery. Strangely, however, each morning his coffin was discovered unearthed, and over time, some began to suspect that even in death, the youth had retained his fear of the dark. Eventually, Nachito's mother and father fashioned him a stone coffin above ground that would always be touched by the light, and while all movement of his remains has since ceased, in recent years, several reports detailing run-ins with an apparition bearing his likeness have surfaced, as well as have incidents in which balloons have been sighted floating near his grave, as if being held by the hand of an invisible child. Also reported across cemetery grounds are orbs visible to the naked eye, disembodied footsteps heard from empty spaces, and encounters with a range of full-bodied entities in clothing spanning the eras. A third popular associated story is often referred to as the sick boy who lost his faith, and tells of a youth named Santiago who was afflicted with a terminal stomach ailment, resulting in his housing at the nearby hospital. This tale tells that one day, Santiago's mother stopped to visit him, bringing with her one of her son's favorite saint statues, but as soon as the boy laid eyes upon it, that he took it into his hands and smashed it against the wall, cursing God for marking him with his disease. Later the same night, it's told Santiago snuck from the hospital and wandered the cemetery, where his corpse was found hanging the next morning. Eerily, to date, many have reported sighting a silhouette swinging by the neck from various trees across the old yard. A final legend, quite possibly more popular than all formerly mentioned, has no title per se, but tells of how, through the 1800s, scores of small animals were found throughout Guadalajara, their bodies drained of blood. This unearthly phenomenon would persist for months before, tragically, the same fate would befall several human babies. Eventually, townsfolk would band together and would track the source of these slayings to what they documented as a vampire. It's told they would corner this vampire before driving a stake through its heart and would bury its remains under a large stone grave within Santa Paula. Over the years, a tree would sprout from this grave and can still be viewed into the present. Disturbingly, it's said that if one snaps a branch from this tree, that it will bleed a substance suspiciously similar to human blood, and that strangely, upon contact, its branches and leaves have a habit of leaving a red residue on any who touch them. This legend concludes by warning that the root system of this sinister growth have become quite large, and that someday they will surely break the stone slab holding the vampire in place, after which this centuries-old demon will be free to exact its vengeance on the nearby populace. On a closing note, the stories featured in this pit stop are only a handful of what's actually tied to Santa Paula, and incidentally, of what's told on local tours. So if you're considering visiting, we highly recommend hiring a local guide and paying for local services in order to learn even more history and lore associated with this impressive landmark. Thanks for tuning in for this Paranormal Pit Stop. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll catch you next time.